So the question is, how do you deal with change and what's changing for you and how do you manage change? And there's two things about change that I see relative to this whole thing, managing your career, is one, what's community look like for you in change? And two, your mindset. So there's mindset and community. And there's a third thing I think that's skill set, that some people have a skill set that is more adaptable. So I want to shift this to a little bit about some of the elements about thinking about managing your career. So we've been talking a little bit about change and mindset and skill set related to this, but I also want to talk a little bit about your brand and the elements of how to manage your brand. So there's two small brands there, Tim Hortons and Starbucks. What is the difference between their identity? Yeah, so I call it like Starbucks is like the BMW of coffee and Tim Hortons is like the Honda of coffee. Would you agree with that? Right, those two things, right? One's the BMW. What else is the difference between their identity? One's Canadian, yeah. Which one's Canadian? Timmy's, yeah. Yeah. Is it Canadian anymore, actually? No. It's fast. You didn't know that. See, yeah. I remember just this. I remember when Krispy Kreme. It was. It's totally. Yeah, it totally was created in Canada. You have to. We take it. Yeah. Now, if I was to say to you a brand like General Motors, your perspective on General Motors, what's its brand like? How clear is it? General. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about it last night. I was watching with my son we were watching last night the Transformers movie. I was looking at, obviously General Motors is a big part of that movie, right? And I was thinking about they've really taken their name seriously. General. They don't. It doesn't mean anything. It's sort of like a hodgepodge of things, right? General, right? Well, how does this relate? Well, I was buying gum recently in my office in Toronto. I went downstairs to this little venue down there, and I went down to buy gum. Guess how many choices of gum I had that day? 131. How'd you know that? You're right. You are not only you are smart. You didn't say that's one of the benefits of your illness, like mind reading, mind mapping, sixth sense, right? By the way, I think you are probably more in tune with people, actually. I think because you're so in tune with your own body and your psychology and your health, I think there is a reality that you actually are more keenly aware of people's emotions, how they're feeling. I actually think that's something you develop empathy for. So that's very, very important. It's interesting, just as an aside, what's the number one reason that people get promoted, you think? Yeah, it's soft skills. So a lot of the things we'll be talking about, the strengths that you adapt, are actually soft skills. And if you get to a certain point, that hard skills get you to a certain reality. Your hard skills will get you to being a physician. Soft skills will get you being the CEO of a hospital. True? Soft skills will get you, hard skills will get you to be a physician. Soft skills will enable you to be the CEO of a hospital. Or whatever it is, whatever sector you're in, right? So soft skills is very, very important. So there's a lot of, there was 131 choices I had of gum. Now, do employers have a lot of choices today when they're hiring? They do, don't they? In fact, we just talked about that. They're not only you're competing in the world, you're competing in Ontario or Toronto and Canada, you're actually competing for your skill set globally right now, in whatever sector you are. Look at IBM. Where's IBM's fastest growing part of their business? Where are they hiring the most? It isn't in North America. They can hire anywhere in things. So how does this relate to this concept of Tim Hortons and Starbucks? Is this concept of identity and the concept of brands. And brands are all about choice, aren't they? The great brands enable us to choose a brand that we identify. We choose it over a competitor, don't we? Because we relate to it, we enjoy it. So great brands are all about choice. So the question I have for you, what's your brand? Why would I choose you? What makes you stand apart? Now, having CF, is that part of your brand? Is that a public part of your brand? No, it's a private part, really, right? It's not something you're going to share with a potential employer, are you? Right? Would you share it with a potential employer? Yeah, you don't have to, but again, I share that a little, maybe in the Q&A we can come back to that because I think it's an important question. How do you manage that relationship with your employer? What does that look like? And yeah. So the issue is that you do have CF as part of your brand, and we've talked about the benefits of that, but there's also the other elements of your brand, which are far beyond having CF, correct? Right? We don't want to get camped on CF being the anchor to your brand, do we? Right? We don't want to make that, but it is part of your brand, just as Tim Hortons and Starbucks have that. And I think there's 4 key things to a brand that you think about it. By the way, we talk about brand, personal. Have you ever heard that term, personal brands? Have you ever heard that concept? It's kind of an emerging concept. Remember we have this thing called personal reputation? We've heard that term, right? Personal reputation. It's the same concept, essentially. So when you hear people talking about personal brands, it's an emerging concept. It's an emerging discussion. It's really this concept we've always had, which is about reputation. Yeah, and this whole idea that Starbucks and Tim Hortons have a reputation, don't they? A very clear reputation. So does Jim. And you and I have a reputation. What is that reputation? And your reputation can really serve you really, really well if you manage it. So there's 4 keys to your brand. Knowing who you are, clearly. Knowing who and where you market is specifically. Knowing how to market yourself. When's the last time you saw a Tim Hortons ad? This morning? Yeah, how long ago, right? Yeah. Now, why is Tim Hortons advertising to us? We know who they are. We know what they do. Why are they doing that to us? Well, I was in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and I was standing at Yonge and Bloor, or not Yonge and Bloor, I was standing along Bloor Street. And I stood on the corner. On one corner was Tim Hortons. On one corner was Starbucks. The other corner was Timothy's. And the other corner was Second Cup. Now, remember 10 years ago, how many coffee stores were there in Toronto? Not that many, were there? I mean, you might have seen one on the corner, correct? So marketing is a very important thing when you think about managing your brand, your personal brand. Just as an aside, by knowing who you are clearly, Strength Finder studies, only 20% of professionals knew their strengths. Clearly knew their strengths. It's interesting the work we do in our firm is really helping employers and individuals really know their strengths, really knowing your strengths clearly. So marketing yourself, that's an important thing to be thinking about today. You know, in the previous generation, you didn't really have to market yourself that much, did you? Right, managing your career, you really didn't have to market yourself. You sort of graduated, you've got your degree or your profession, you join the company, and then you kind of ride through, don't you? Now, by the way, I think that people that had great careers always use these principles. I don't think that they're new principles, but I do think they're more important because of competition. So marketing yourself is more important because why? Because there's more change, there's more competition. You have to raise your visibility and you have to raise your awareness. Now, I'm not talking about selling yourself. Have you ever heard the term you need to learn how to sell yourself better? Now, the question is, who here likes being sold? Well, but in that case, they're not selling, you're buying. Right? Because you're just still, you said, now, who here likes to buy? Yeah, we do. We prefer buying over selling. So when people talk about selling yourself or having to go to the market or do a job search, a lot of the framing comes around this concept of selling, which is exactly the same as what we talked about at the very beginning, where we sat at the table and asked people to buy tickets for the draw. That was selling. Marketing is when we offered them the cart, wasn't it? And we entered in the conversation, we entered in the relationship. So the thing you think about is not selling, but how do you market yourself? And even being at events like this, by the way, is a way of marketing yourself. You're building community, because I'm assuming that not all of you come from the same sector, right? You know, so there's a way of marketing, there's a way of connecting, there's a way of reaching out, there's a way of expanding your network. Being involved at this organization is a great way. Being involved in the board, volunteering in different ways. There is a benefit to CF, but there's also a professional benefit that opportunities can come out of this. That's another benefit of being in community. And CF has its own community, doesn't it? You're a part of it. So another benefit of having CF is you're in community. And one of the interesting stats about community is 70% of opportunity comes from community. Community equals opportunity. Community equals opportunity. Now, the one thing about community you have to think about is how do you engage in community? How do you contribute to community? Which is, again, is being involved in CF is how can you get involved? How can you participate on boards or get involved with different elements of the community to contribute or to raise your awareness? A very, very powerful thing. Same with your professional association. If you're in finance, or you're in IT, or in healthcare, whatever it is. What can you do to be involved to raise your community, to raise your awareness? Again, not for the fact of saying, I need a job, or it's all about me. But the fact is, that opportunity will come to you as a result of doing that, as a result of the authenticity of being yourself. And evolving and adapting. And if, remember that little company called Eaton's? How do Eaton's deal with evolving and adapting its brand? It's dead. It's dead. Now, would Eaton still be alive if it had addressed change differently today? Absolutely, right? So evolving and adapting is really key. You can be really, really strong. And Tim Hortons and Starbucks have to be really careful because obviously the market continually evolves and adapts. So do you. So a quick thing to think about in your own brand. You know, I talked about number one is really knowing your strengths. So there's 5 key elements to your strengths. There's your talents, your values, your passions, lifestyle, and ecosystems. 5 core elements to your strengths, really knowing this.